Alright, if you're looking at this video, you're about to take on a big job. I've got an easier way to do it. Normally, if you're going to be replacing these front shocks right here, you got to take a lot off. These the ABS lines, the brake lines, a bunch of different stuff has to come off. If you have the right tools, this method should be a lot faster. You only got 1, 2, 3, 4 bolts that you have to take out. And you're also going to have to loosen these 2 bolts on the lower control arms. Now, because you're going to be messing around with these, you're going to have to get an alignment afterwards. You should be getting an alignment after you get new shocks anyway, but you're going to be messing around with torque on both of these, so you're going to make sure to want to do that. Your first step is going to be to take out the 2 lower ball joint bolts. There's 1 and 2. Both of these are 22 millimeter. You're going to have the best luck of using impact, but you can also use a breaker bar and get these off. Before I take the 2 bolts out of the lower ball joint, I'm actually going to remove the mount right here, this mounting bolt for the stabilizer. I'm doing that because as I'm taking these 2 out of the ball joint down here, I can see the whole lower control arm starting to drop. So I'm going to take this one out before there gets to be too much stress on it. One thing that's important is that when you remove this one, you got to have both sides of the truck jacked up equally. Otherwise there's going to be some weird stress on this and it won't let you get that bolt out very easily. Alright, now that we got that out, we're going to do an easy part. There's 4 bolts right up here that you got to loosen up, and I'm just going to loosen them to the top of each stud right here. And this is all with a 14 millimeter. Do not loosen this one. That's the one that holds the spring to the shock. Alright, next I'm going to take out this bolt right here. It's a really long one that goes all the way through. So I'm going to loosen it from here and then tap it out with a hammer to get it all the way slid out. Alright, now we're going back to these 2 big bolts under the lower ball joint. Now we are free from the lower control arm. My next step is going to be to take all 4 of these bolts off of the upper part of the shock right here. Okay, so at this point the shock is free at the bottom and it's also free at the top. The problem is we can't get it out of the bottom, this little cradle area down here on the lower control arm. So the solution is we need to drop the lower control arm. It needs to swing down just a little bit. The way to do that is to loosen a bolt here and here so that this is loosened up enough we can pop it down just a little bit, enough to get the shock out. Now both of these are torqued well over 100 pounds. I don't know if they're up to 200, but they're torqued pretty high, so make sure you have a good breaker bar. I already broke 1 bar on the other side trying to do this. Also, of course, if you have impact, you could probably use that. I wanted to loosen it as little as I could to let this still fall without having these bolts come all the way off. Also, make sure you take a Sharpie and you mark where these little cam discs are on all sides. So there's one on the other side of this one, and then of course there's 2 others. There's 4 total of these discs. You got to mark them and try to get them lined up as close as you can when you tighten this back up. The reason you want an alignment scheduled is it's really hard to line it back up. On the other side, when I did this, I got it pretty close, but not perfect, so we'll see how it drives when I get it all done. The alignment's scheduled, so it should take care of it. Alright, so this last bolt right here gave me a lot of trouble. I broke my 1/2-inch breaker bar on that, had to use the neighbor's impact. But now that this one's loose, see, I was able to push the control arm down, and now I'm going to pry out the shock and pull it out from the bottom. Okay, now we're going to slide the new one in. Pay attention to the out arrow right here, make sure that's facing out. Now tighten everything up at the top. To note, these are Gabriel shocks and they need a 15mm for these 4 at the top. Next step is going to be to jack the control arm back and then to slide the bolt through so this is all sitting in one place. Alright, now that you have this bottom bolt in, the rest of it is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to have to jack it up enough. You may have to jack the other side up enough too to be able to put a stabilizer bar bolt back through. And then of course, you want to tighten up all the bolts on the control arm. After that, go get an alignment. You should be good to go for some new shocks.